Alright, so in the previous lesson we finished up illustrating our fire hydrant, and if you walk through that process with me, you probably saw how time-consuming of a process creating pixel art can really be. Now granted, we created a fairly detailed fire hydrant, but we were only creating a single object. Imagine how long it would take to illustrate an entire scene. You know, pixel art is something that's very, very popular for creating city scenes. So if we were doing maybe a city block or a series of buildings, imagine how much detail and how much time it would take to actually create that type of an image. Well, Photoshop actually has some really great tools that are built into it that we can utilize to save some time throughout this process. And I'm going to go ahead and show you some of those now. The first one we're going to talk about is creating custom brushes. Now, if you look here on our screen in front of us, I've got a few lines that I've drawn here of varying lengths and a few other objects like corner pieces and even some ellipses that we've used in previous lessons. So I tell you what, in drawing these line segments, I know that this particular line segment right here, this longest one, is 100 bricks long, or 200 pixels wide, being that each brick is 2 pixels. This next one here is 80 bricks. This is 60, 40, and 20. So let me go ahead and show you how to create a custom brush here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab my lasso tool. We're going to make a selection here. Alright, now this is really actually pretty easy, so let's come up here to Edit. We're going to choose Define Brush Preset here, and we're going to get this brush name. We're going to be prompted to name it. I suggest giving your brushes relevant names, so if you are dealing with a lot of them in a list view, you can recognize them just by their names. So let's just go ahead and call this one ISO Line, and I'm going to put 100 here in parentheses, just so I know how many bricks that line actually includes. So you can see here we have actually a preview of the brush itself. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And that's all there is to it. We've created a custom brush. Now let me go ahead and deselect that here. And I'm going to grab my pencil tool by using the keyboard shortcut B. And then I'm going to right click anywhere on my canvas here. So we're going to bring up the brush dialog. And I'm going to scroll all the way down. Now if you do this, you're probably going to get similar brushes. These are the default brushes that load with Photoshop CS5. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom here. And we're going to see this ISO Line 100 brush that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that here. And let's just go ahead and click. And you can see here now I have a red selected. Let me go ahead and undo that and hit D so we can set to default colors. And you can see here that I can draw as many 100 segment lines as I want really quickly. So that's going to save us a lot of time as opposed to building these lines brick by brick. Now if you check in the project files for this course, you'll probably notice that we do have a pixel art brushes file in there. Those are some brushes that I've already created here. You can load those up if you want to, or you can go ahead and create your own pixel art brush set. Now I've given you some examples here of several objects you can put into that set, but I would encourage you, as you're working along creating pixel art, keep an eye on what you're drawing. Think about things that might be helpful to save as a brush so that you can reuse them later on in your piece or even in future pieces. So I tell you what, let's go over here to our brush dialog again. And now if you're wanting to create your own pixel art brush set, you're probably going to find that most of these brushes in the default set are not going to be helpful at all for creating pixel art. So I'm going to come over to this little flyout menu here. Let's go ahead and choose Preset Manager. And this is where we're going to be able to manage all of the brushes inside Photoshop for this particular set. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and remove most of these brushes here, with the exception of that brush we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first one here. I'm going to hold down Shift and click on this second to last one here. You can see that it selects all the brushes in between, and I'm going to hit Delete. Now we're left with just our one custom brush that we've created. But if we go through and create several different line lengths, we create several other brushes here of things we're going to reuse, and now we want to save this set out as its own unique pixel art set, then what we need to do is hit this Save Set button. Now I went ahead and selected our brush and it became available here. Let me go ahead and hit that. And you can see that Photoshop prompts us to actually save this file. Now there's that pixelartbrushes.abr file that's included in our project files, but here we have an opportunity to give it a file name, and you can see it does have the .abr file extension for a brushes file. And that'll allow you to basically load this file up on different machines or in different files and use it multiple times. So I want to go ahead and cancel this. I don't want to save this right now, and let's go ahead and hit Done here. Now let's say that you don't want to create your own set. You just want to use the set that I've included in the the project files, but we need to know how to load that set up. So again, I'm going to right click on my canvas here, and we're going to go to this same little flyout menu, and you're just going to choose this load brushes option here. So if you choose that and browse to that file in the project files, you'll be able to load that up either by itself, or you'll be able to append that to the brushes that you already have here in this menu. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect that here. And there you have custom brushes. Like I said before, I'm not going to create custom brushes for all of these different objects in our lesson. This is just an example. Feel free to load up those brushes in the project files if you want to. But what I'd like to talk to you now is about another action we did quite a bit. If you walk through creating that fire hydrant with me, you probably saw me several times select an object, then come up here to Edit, choose Transform, and either flip it horizontally or flip it vertically. I'm going to go ahead and flip this one horizontal just like so. Now this is an action that we performed quite a bit, so I would actually consider recording this and assigning a keyboard shortcut to it in the Actions panel. Now let me go ahead and undo that and show you what I'm talking about here. If we come up to our Windows drop down and choose the Actions panel here, you can see I actually have mine open here. Let me just stretch that down. You can see that Photoshop comes with several default actions here. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. And you can see they're in a folder here. It's an action set. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new action set by clicking on this little folder button at the bottom. And let's just title this set My Actions. Now what we can do is we can record new actions in Photoshop and save them inside this My Actions folder. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and select this line again here. And let's go ahead and hit this new action button right here next to the trash can. We're going to get this new action dialog, and the first thing we want to do is name our action so we know exactly what that action does. So I'm going to call this one Flip Horizontal. And we're saving this in the set My Actions that we just created. Now I'm going to assign a keyboard function key to this. Now this is going to allow me to flip objects horizontal just by hitting a keyboard button. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this down, and I'm going to assign Flip Horizontal to F4. Now we can also assign a modifier key like Shift or Control to that by checking one of these boxes. I don't want to do that though. And we can also even give our actions different colors here. You can see those in this drop down. So I'm going to go ahead and hit record at this point. And now that I've hit record, notice that the Actions panel looks a little different. We have a little record button down here that's pressed in, letting us know that we're recording. So I'm going to come up and choose Edit, Transform, and let's go ahead and choose Flip Horizontal here. You can see that that action has been recorded under this Flip Horizontal action. So that's all I want this action to do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the Stop button now. And we've recorded our first action. And it's just that simple. Now I would probably go through and actually record a second action here for flipping objects vertically. Now I'm not going to walk you through that, it's an identical process, but what I am going to show you is that we actually included an actions file in the project files for this course as well. So if you don't want to record your own actions, feel free to load mine up. You can come to this little flyout menu here in the Actions panel and simply go to Load Actions. And if you browse to the project files for this course, you'll see that we have this pixelartactions.atn file. Or if you're saving your own actions, you can actually, instead of choose Load Actions, let me just cancel this. You can come over here and choose this Save Actions option right here. Now notice it's grayed out right now. It's because we have this individual sub-action selected here. I'm going to go ahead and select my Actions set here, and we'll come over here. And if we choose Save Actions at this point, we'll be able to save all of the actions in that set out as a separate file. So again, feel free to record your own actions or even just load the actions up that I've included in the project files. I can tell you just from experience that these two actions, Flip Horizontal and Flip Vertical, will save you a ton of time. Alright, now those are just a couple of quick time-saving tips using some of the tools here in Photoshop. Let me just go and deselect that here, and I'm going to come over here to my Layers panel, and I want to hide this layer. And I'm going to turn on this layer right here. Now, this layer should look kind of familiar. This is the fire hydrant that we finished up in the previous lesson, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on that for you here. And notice here that we have three different fire hydrants. We'll talk about the other two here in just a moment, but what I want to talk to you about first is workflow. Now, the same exact workflow that we used in creating this fire hydrant, we can utilize on much larger pixel art projects. So if you remember with the fire hydrant, we started out by isolating the basic shapes of the fire hydrant and drawing those geometric shapes. We started with this column that makes up the main body of the fire hydrant. We did another column for this ring right here in the base, and then we added these two cross pieces here, this dome piece and this ellipse that protrudes out towards us here. Now, by drawing all of these geometric shapes and then merging them together, we ended up with the black outlines of this object. After we had completed the outlines, we added simple flat color and then planned out a highlight as well as a shadow. Once we'd applied all the highlights and shadows, we decided to blend those together using a process known as dithering. Now, that exact workflow, like I just said, you can utilize that exact same workflow on much larger projects. Say, for example, if you're illustrating a city block with several buildings in it. Using this exact same workflow can really just keep you on track. Now, let's go ahead and talk about working on a much larger scale project, like, for example, a city block. Now, obviously, there's a lot of detail here in this fire hydrant, and we probably would not include this much detail if we were illustrating this fire hydrant at its actual size for an entire city block. Our fire hydrant would probably look a little more like this one here, or even this one here. Now, you can see here that a lot of the detail has been eliminated in examining this one compared to this one right here. Now, if we actually zoom out on that though, our eye is going to fill in that detail. This is still highly recognizable as a fire hydrant. It's really all about how many pixels you want to allocate for this specific object and its details. Now, if you remember when we drew this fire hydrant, we were drawing on a document size of 300 pixels by 300 pixels. And in zooming out here, you can see that this document we're working on now is much, much larger. In fact, if I bring up my image size here, you can see that the document we're working on is 1024 by 768 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. So again, a much larger document, and this is actually the document we're going to use as we begin planning a much larger composition. Now, as we look towards creating that larger composition, I want to go ahead and take a moment to talk to you about kind of an overall workflow when you're working on something much larger. If you're working on, say, a city block, for example, you're not going to start with a small detail like a fire hydrant. We've already seen what happens when we try and resize pixel art and how Photoshop adds sort of that dithering effect to it. So it's always going to be best to draw your objects the actual size in their environment. Now, in working on a much larger composition like a city block, what you need to do is you need to work from big to small, meaning take your biggest elements first, plan those out, draw their basic geometric forms, then slowly begin to work smaller. And once you've got all your geometric forms mapped out, then start to fill in some details. Really, there's kind of a delicate balance here, being that you want to make sure that once you get down to these small details, you still have enough pixels left to be able to draw these objects and have them be recognizable when you're zoomed out. So with that said, hopefully these time-saving tips will really help you out, and these workflows will prepare you for the next lesson, where we're going to pick up where we're leaving off here, and we're going to begin composing a much larger composition.